Welcome back, everybody. It is Michael Holson back at you with another fractions video. This fractions video is going to be for subtracting fractions. So let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, when it comes to subtracting fractions, it is very similar to adding fractions, except you subtract the tops instead of add the tops. Now, when you have different denominators, which we'll get to later, you're going to have to do the same step, find the common denominator, raise your fractions, and then at the very end, subtract. So for now, let's go ahead and get to this slide. So to subtract fractions with the same denominator, all you need to do is subtract the numerators from each other. Since our denominators are already the same, we have 4/5 minus 1/5. Simply subtract the tops. 4 minus 1 will give you 3. Keep your existing denominator, which is 5, and your answer will be 3/5. Now, again, simplify the fraction if needed. But if you look at 3 and 5, they don't share any common factor, so you cannot reduce it. Now, I want to bring you to another example of subtracting fractions. Now, this example, 4/6 minus 2/6, if you notice, our bottoms are the same. Our denominators are already the same, so all we have to do is simply subtract our tops from each other. Now, 4 minus 2 is going to give us 2. Now, again, keep the bottom. So your answer would be 2/6. Now, if you were to leave your answer as 2/6, you would be wrong, because 2 and 6 share a common factor. So if we go ahead and write out the factors of each number. Now again, factors are just numbers that multiply to get a certain number. For example, factors of 2. What numbers multiply to make 2? 1 and 2. Next, we're going to find the factors of 6. What multiply to make 6? Well, I know 1 and 6 multiply to get 6. And I also know that 2 times, let me erase this over here real quick so we can fit that in. Now I know 2 times 3 is also 6. And again, 1 times 6 is 6. Now what we want to do is find the common factor. Bam, there we go. So there's our common factor 2. And remember, everybody, what we do is we take, let me move myself over here real quick. Bam. So remember, what we're going to do is we're going to take this 2/6 and we're going to divide the top and the bottom by the common factor, which is 2. Now when we do that, bam, we'll do 2 divided by 2, which will give us 1. And then we can do 6 divided by 2, which will give us 3. So our simplified final answer is going to be 1/3. All right, everybody, good job. Good job, good job. Let me try to maneuver myself back. Bam. And let's get to the next step, which is going to be, bam. Let me get this back up. And let's get ourselves to subtracting fractions with different denominators. All right, now just like I was saying earlier, you do the same steps as you would for adding, except when you get to the end, you're going to subtract your numerators. So let's take a look. Sometimes you need to subtract fractions with different denominators. To do this, change the fractions to equivalent fractions with a common denominator. So our example is 4/5 minus 1/3. So since both fractions have different denominators, find the lowest common denominator. So remember, to find the lowest common denominator, what we do is we take both of our denominators, 3 and 5, and we count the multiples up. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Then we go to 5 and count its multiples up, 5, 10, 15, until we get a common denominator. Now remember, you always want to choose the lowest, because the lowest will get you to an answer that you won't have to simplify more than 1 or 2 times. Now, our lowest common denominator is going to be 15. So let's take a look. Now, change the fractions to equivalent fractions with a common denominator. So what we're going to do, let me move myself back over here into the middle. Bam. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 4/5 and 1/3, and we're going to raise them. Now our common denominator was 15. So 5 times what number will give you 15? Well, 5 times 3, because 5 times 3 is 15. Now whatever you do to the bottom, remember, you do to the top. So we're going to take this 4 and multiply it by 3. So 4 times 3 will give us 12. So our fraction is raised to 12 over 15. Now we're going to go to the bottom and raise this fraction. So we have 1/3. Now remember, our new denominator is 15. So 3 times what number is 15? Well, 5, because 3 times 5 is 15. So again, whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So 1 times 5 is 5. So now you have two fractions that have the same denominator. So now we can subtract. So what we're going to do is subtract the tops. 12 minus 5 is going to give us 7. Bring over your denominator, and your answer is 7 over 15. Great job, everybody. So, as always, let's get to a fresh example. So here we go. Here's our example, everybody. We have 3/5 minus 1/2. So what I did was I wrote our factors of each number over here already, because we have to find the lowest common denominator. Now again, we have to find the lowest common denominator because our fractions that we're trying to subtract do not have the same denominator. So let's take 5 and find the factors, the multiples. So the multiples of 5, 5, 10, 15, 20, you can keep going. Now the factors of 2, our multiples of 2 are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So to find the lowest common denominator, get your denominators and count the multiples up until you have a number in common. Now when you have that lowest common denominator and you already know what it is, what we can do is now fill in our new denominator. Now 2 times what number is going to give us 10? Perfect. 2 times 5, because 2 times 5 is 10. Now again, whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So 1 times 5 give you 5. Perfect. Let me try to make that a little better. Bam. Now we're going to go here and we're going to raise that 5. Now 5 times what number is 10? Perfect. 2. Now, whatever you do to the bottom, you do the same to the top. Now, I know I say that a lot. Whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. Now, the reason why I say that is to stick it in your mind. So when you start doing fractions by yourself, that stays in your mind and you always know whatever you multiply the bottom by, you multiply the top by. So 3 times 2 give us 6. Now both of our fractions are raised. They have the same denominator now. So what we can do is simply subtract the tops and get ourselves the answer. So 3/5 minus 1/2 equals 1 over 10. Now I know you have to do the work to get the answer, but that's math, everybody. Perfect. Let's go ahead and get to our next part. Now this next part is going to be subtracting with mixed numbers. So what we have to do is the same thing, just subtract our mixed numbers from each other. So when you need to subtract fractions with different denominators, to do this, change the fractions to equivalent fractions with a common denominator. So 2 4/5 minus 1 1/3 is our example. So since both fractions have different denominators, find the lowest common denominator. So we're going to go back here. We're going to take our denominators 3 and 5, and we're going to count the multiples up. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 5, 10, 15. So as you can see, our lowest common denominator is 15. So now let's go ahead and raise our fractions. Now to raise your fractions again, remember our new denominator is now 15. So we're going to take 2 and 4/5 and we're going to raise our denominator from 5 to 15. So by doing that, we use multiplication. 5 times what number is 15? Well, 5 times 3. So 5 times 3 will give you 15. So whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. 4 times 3 will give you 12. And just bring over your whole number. Now we're going to take 1 and 1/3 and raise it so the 3 is also a 15. Now to raise, again, you use multiplication. So 3 times what number is 15? 3 times 5. Now, whatever you do to the bottom, you also again do to the top. So 1 times 5 is 5. And just bring over your whole number. Now that we have common denominators and we've raised both of our fractions, we can simply subtract the tops. So 12 minus 5 will give you 7. Bring your denominator over, which was 15, and subtract your whole numbers from each other, which is 2 minus 1, which gives us 1. So your answer is 1 and 7 over 15. Perfect. So let's go ahead and get to our last example. Now my example here is a little messy, so I'll move myself right here. Bam. And our example is 2 and 3/5 minus 1 and 1/2. So first thing I want you to notice, our denominators are different. So we need to find the common denominator. So I took 5 and I counted the multiples up, 5, 10, you can keep going, 15, 20. And then I took 2 and counted its multiples up, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, until I ran into a number they both have in common. Now again, if you write out a lot of the multiples of each number, you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 common numbers, but it's up to us to choose the lowest. So back to the example, our common denominator was 10. So we're going to fill that in. Bam. Now let's find the top. 2 times what number is 10? Perfect, 5, because 2 times 5 is 10. So whatever you do to the bottom, let's go ahead and do it to the top. 1 times 5 is, perfect, 5. Let me clean that up, boom. So notice I also, as always, brought over the whole numbers. Brought over the 1, brought over the 2. So let's go ahead and raise this 3/5. So 5 times what number will give us 10? Perfect, 2, because 5 times 2 is 10. So whatever we do to the bottom, let's go ahead and do to the top. 3 times 2, bam, give us 6, because 3 times 2 is 6. So what we're going to do now, let's go ahead and subtract them from each other. 6 minus 5, give us 1. Bring over your denominator because that does not change. And subtract your whole numbers. 2 minus 1 is 1. So your answer from 2 and 3/5 minus 1 and 1/2 will give you 1 and 1/10. Very good. So I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope it helped a lot. The next video that's coming is going to be multiplying fractions with whole numbers, and multiplying mixed numbers. So I will see you there.